And I remember John coming in saying, he went, phew, I've never said this to you, but I'm really glad you repainted that set.
I'm just gonna tell you the original set color was green, and because it was the Emerald City, and of course we felt like it should really be pink, and so it became pink.
Welcome to Inside the Set with SETDECOR, a series that focuses on the design and decor of the stories that excite us and ignite our imagination, where we discuss the collaboration between set decorators and production designers and hear first-hand accounts of how these works of art came to be, from their inception, ideas on a page, to completion, when we get to sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with SETDECOR. I'm Rosemary Brandenburg, SDSA, and I'm excited to welcome my good friends, set decorator Lee Sandales and production designer Nathan Crowley, to discuss their imaginative collaboration on Wicked for Good. This is a thrilling follow-up to last year's musical feature film, for which Nathan and Lee were awarded the Oscar for Best Production Design at the 97th Academy Awards. Their work continues to defy gravity with their creation of The World of Oz under the impeccable direction of John M. Chu. On the morning of this interview, it was announced that the film doubled the opening weekend box office of last year's Wicked. This film has opened to a massive $226 million worldwide in the first weekend. It's the biggest start ever for a Broadway musical adaptation. So congratulations to you both.
Thanks. Good news.
And by way of a little bit of introduction, I just want to start by saying, Lee Sandales, Wicked was your third Oscar nomination, which you won, but you were also nominated in 2020 for the World War I drama, 1917, and for War Horse in 2012. And obviously you won pretty much every award there is for Wicked, but you also, like BAFTA and SDSA and ADG, but you also had BAFTA noms for those films, as well as The Batman in 2022, Star Wars Episode 7, and then The Force Awakens, excuse me, in 2015. And then you also were nominated by the Set Decorator Society for The Batman, for Doolittle, for Wonka, and then you also had ADG noms for Wonka, which you with Nathan, and also Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So it's a long list, and I'm getting a little tongue-tied because it's so long. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Of course, Nathan Crowley has earned a host of accolades besides Wicked. You had Academy Award nominations for The Prestige, Dark Knight, Interstellar, Dunkirk, First Man, and Tenet, excuse me, all with Christopher Nolan, director. And you've also received BAFTA nominations for Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, First Man, etc., Dunkirk. And in television, you were recognized with an Emmy nomination for HBO's Westworld. And just to cap it off, you also have designed a number of exhibitions for Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute, New York, for the Met Gala. You've done opera with Sofia Coppola, and you've designed a watch, I understand.
Yeah.
The Hamilton Space Watch. So these are some pretty accomplished guys, and I just am in awe always of your work.
Thank you.
Just to say, that's long, but I really.
That makes us very old, doesn't it?
I know. Well, I think you should be our agent. You make us sound amazing. Thank you.
You are amazing. You are really amazing. So Wicked and Wicked for Good, they're shot simultaneously. And this one, Wicked for Good, is set 4 years later. Elphaba and Glinda have moved on from Shiz University, and they're living in exile for Elphaba, and they're living at the beautiful palace of the Emerald City for Glinda. So although some sets were revisited, some are no longer part of this movie. Like, I don't even think we go to the school much, maybe a little.
Flashback, that's it.
Yeah. So just to start, how hard was it to do all those changeovers to make time changes between the sets? I mean, Lee, you had to redress everything a number of times during production.
It's interesting that you should list those sets because when, I mean, the films were released a year apart. And when we made both films, they were shot at exactly the same time. And it was the most amazing experience. I think for me, what I was really surprised at when I first watched For Good was the tonal differences that John had actually created in like the second film. And you know how different it was. And yet he had shot those scenes almost days apart. I mean, John Chu is an extremely clever person and he's really gifted. They allowed us time to do changeovers, like with like the Emerald City, where the piazza was completely cleared of all the joy of the first movie, and it was very much stripped back for like the second movie. I mean, that was the main set which we revisit in For Good. I mean, other than that, I think and the changeovers of Munchkinland as well. Nathan, I think Munchkinland was the biggest redress or the biggest installation for construction. Would you say in terms of reusing?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Great Hall, which was also changed over for the wedding, but we'll get to that. Yeah, Munchkin Land, because we start the second film really. Yeah, well, we started on Yellow Brick Road with Alphaba freeing the animals, but we come here several times and we sort of made the choice to redress this backlot set we had into the second film. We looked at other locations like Hampton Court to try and do the opening of the Yellow Brick Road, like maybe we do it in a sort of grander way. But we had all the Aussian elements here, and we had the Yellow Brick Road spirals. There's actually two spirals. They kind of link arm in arm, unlike the Wizard of Oz, where it's a Dorothy spiral out. We have one coming in, which signifies the house landing, and you can see it in this photo. And the journey, the end of the journey for Wicked Witch of the East, and the beginning for Dorothy. So those spirals were sort of key. So we kind of, yeah, we redressed this. The house was difficult because we designed and built that just on the other side of the back lot, and we prepared it all, and then we had to lift it in one day. So it's on this sort of metal skid pad, and we sort of craned it in. So it was tight for time, but this is a very important scene. This is where the Wizard of Oz collides with Wicked. It's also funny when they go when they have their fight. It's there's so much humor in this when she does the Wicked Witch of the West cackle. I kind of love that moment.
Do you know what's actually just looking at the redress of Munchkinland? There was a whole background story to the yellow bricks, which I just actually remembered actually seeing this is that the Munchkins, of course, farmed tulips, and we had the idea that they'd already been processing like hemp, which was with the weaving of the cloth and then using the heads of the tulips, to dye the cloth. And then when the wizard has actually taken over, like yellow tulips were actually chosen, and the heads of the tulips were then cut and then therefore used to make paint and dye, and therefore there's a whole process of the Munchkins actually making the bricks for the Yellow Brick Road. That's not present in the film, but it's present in those images there. And that was the development of it. It didn't obviously make like the final cut, but that was the process which we tried to show. And that was a massive redress, coupled with the fact that we then built the rogue building machine that was almost like this giant kind of like horse pulled, say oxen pulled like vehicle that the bricks just actually fell off the back and created the patterns, which you can see there in those images of the Yellow Brick Road. Yeah, and getting to work with Nathan on the fact that you could build just the Yellow Brick Road. God, that was just the most amazing gift. It was quite
Yeah,
a thing to
the
see.
Yellow Brick Road is brilliant because it's like everyone sees it as this sort of you follow it to meet the wizard. That's people's nostalgia. But in Wicked, it is actually a form of oppression. It's like a Roman road but bendy, where the wizard's reaching out to oppress the land of Oz. And so the real story behind the Yellow Brick is looked at in a very different way in Wicked, and in a weird way. the fact that these colorful munchkins now only deal with yellow is they lose their color and they lose their freedom. And so these are all great story points that Wicked is just showing you. It's just a different point of view of the story, which I love. But yeah, so Yellow Brick Road has lots of meanings, and we also have to. We cannot. The reason it bends and undulates on the soundstage is because we have to sort of put a foot in nostalgia, give you the nostalgia of the original Wizard of Oz, because people have a love of the Yellow Brick Road, so it's got to feel like Yellow Brick Road. And we painted it into the backings just as Cedric Gibbons had. So you feel that it is that road, but it has many more meanings in Wicked. I love the fact that no one sort of the Easter egg of the end of the Wicked Witch of the East and the beginnings of Dorothy being an agent of the wizard and Elphaba's story to the west, as far west as you can go. And and then that obviously starts the third act, and then Galinda has to become the Good Witch of the North. I mean, there's just so many brilliant stories in here. I love the fact that the acceptance of Elphaba that she has to become the villain for Oz, so that Galinda can become the hero. It's just, I mean, I get goose pimples for Wicked for Good, because it took us all of the first Wicked to build to these lovely storylines.
Well, speaking of Elphaba, she's exiled out to the woods, and the woods are, along with the Yellow Brick Road, the woods are another huge symbol and a recurring theme. You've got those wonderful circular trees that you designed, and this beautiful nest where she's living. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to let Lee talk about the interior, because it's totally Lee's. So my theory goes as far. We always say that I start out here at the top end, and Lee comes and meets me in the middle and takes over. So, but the theory of the nest is she can fly. Why wouldn't she be airborne in the hidden top canopy of the great forests of Oz, the circular forest? So this set really came out of, well, she should have a hidden nest in the canopy. And it came out of our greens department. We didn't want it to feel fake, so we decided we were gonna weave the whole nest with our greens department. So we built them a platform, and I had the steel department with them, and they literally weaved roughly the shape. And wherever the branches curved around, we get openings or windows. So it was very sculptural. Sort of it became much more than we'd originally had on a piece of paper, because during the build it was sculpted, and then Lee has to put in this character of Elphaba and her loneliness, which which is tricky.
And we really wanted to feel that she was with nature, and that the things which are actually present from where she now lives, hiding away in this canopy, is that it was all either woven or been put together by her, forage taken from the forest, and the furniture pieces, everything was a bespoke make. We actually worked with the Greens team, and we're using like parts of trees, like branches, to create like small tables, like a small kitchen, somewhere for her to sit, somewhere for her to weave. Her bedspread in the bed downstairs was woven from like wools and moss and just things found from the forest floor. So we felt like everything around her was about kind of Elphaba now, Elphaba in for good. Everything that she had abandoned, all her worldly goods, she just stepped away, and everything was just about her and saving the animals and trying to actually resolve the problems of Oz. Actually suggested she'd been there for some time, probably for like a year or two. And and what actually came out of it, that our actress Cynthia became very much part of it. Like, I really wanted her to, because I felt like she was obviously, like, now she knew who kind of Elphaba was, and she became like this guide, and she was amazing to work with, and she gave me loads of amazing pointers, and we therefore created this new home for her.
I mean, I should also say that because of the Grimoire and the fact she has connection with the Grimoire, she can read it. It's ancient, and it connects we always saw it as the Grimmery being from an ancient time of the land. So the nest and nature ties in with the sort of storyline of the Grimmery and the fact that that is where she feels most comfortable in the land of Oz, not in the city, not in the Emerald City, which is the modern times. So, it was there's some good story points, and there was a lot of hours with Cynthia in here. I remember Lee. It was a lot of hours. It's a very personal space for her. So, and then we have Fiero coming in as well. So there's a sort of connection to a separate part, which was the bedroom, which was again sort of the bed was sculpted out of potential tree branches that had sort of grown through the nest. Yeah, it was a big piece of sculpture, really, wasn't it?
It was, most of the fabrics we had woven, we just really wanted to feel like it was all part of the earth and that
Yeah.
had come from forest. We went to a considerable amount of like, thought, and it really was led by like, her character almost living alone in like this space.
I love the theme that you refer to of the ancient Oz, like before times, before the wizards come in and made his changes and exiled the animals. And that's just a wonderful. Where's that backstory from? I'm not familiar. Is it from not from the old books?
No, it's like it's from me. It's from my childhood. I used to watch Excalibur, John Borman's version. And Merlin always used to say, the time of the dragon is over, the time of the land and the dragon is over. And I was so blown away by that the way he delivered those lines as a kid. I was always overwhelmed by the fact this is the time of man. So if you sort of apply that to the Grimmery being the time of the land and Kiamiko being ancient and being Winky country, which is the west, the country to the west of Oz, and the great forests and nature, and then you have Kiamiko, and then the time of man, well, time of people, I should say. The time of the wizard is modern times, and then I sort of invented the middle bit, which was the time of harmony, which was Shiz. So really, we had these building blocks in the art department, which aren't part of the film, but they're part of the design. And I think you have to the visual design, and I think it what it does is it helps us have a guttural feeling of what fits and what doesn't by creating your own backstory. Because we have to move when we're working, we have to move at such pace, as you know this, Rosemary, all too well, that you have to have instinct of what works and what doesn't, and you have to make the choice instantly. And so to build your own backstories, I think that really have nothing to do with script, actually. It's just really to run the art department. And when I say the art department, I mean set deck, props, construction, even special effects. I mean everyone. So who has anything to do with building these things.
Well, Lee, I'm sure you had a great deal of research to do. Are there research stories of your own that come into this? Not just, I mean, there's a lot. I was going to start asking you about the wizard backstory research for that crazy workshop.
It was also, because there's a jump in time between the two films. When Galinda's in the pink apartment, we created like this hall of memories. You can just glimpse it for like a moment. But again, a bit kind of like with Cynthia, Ariana, like was really part of that process of creating this hall. It was on the upper floor of the set, which is basically there. In there, there's a representation of her life through every stage of it, from childhood all the way through to where she is now. And she's singing "Girl in a Bubble," and it's kind of like the whole set's really like a metaphor of her actually being trapped, and just wanting to get out. And she eventually does, of course. But that particular set, that was such a beautiful set, I have to say. It was. And it photographs so well, Nathan. It really, really does. It was, and the development of that set, that was actually, I think we had shot the girls' dorm in Shiz, and which is in film, and this was up almost third. It was the third set, wasn't it? Yeah, and it was just like suddenly jumping tonally to film too. It wasn't, something which I was expecting, but John was just his guide to actually help us. And and Ari again, giving us like the pointers to where she felt her character led. And so we were able to create this whole background to her life in like the upper floors.
Because what the way we sort of myself and Lee work is we're trying to get the architecture right. But Lee comes into my office and we sit for hours and he brings me his boards and his research, as you were saying. But you always come in with a story for every piece and every character, a character-led story for why this exists, and which is a joy because I get lost in. It's just so busy in the art department. It's actually quite nice to shut the door and have a chat about like the design and the research and the backstories and so that becomes a good part of the day without someone asking you whether you want flathead screws in this hinge or do you want do we scallop this in the mold shop, do we what color do you want for this, because you're bombarded with questions. There's nowhere safe to go. But this set is we completely redecorated this whole set 6 days before we shot because I'd walked in. I woke up early one morning, like at 4 in the morning, and it was like, that set doesn't work. It does looks horrible. So it was like, actually, it's on a Saturday because I remember it's like, oh God, I got to get a cab to Sky Studios. It's about an hour away, and I got to call the whole paint department. Lee, I think you were working that Saturday. I got to get 30 painters in, and I got to repaint it because the colors. And then I went over to Lee's shop, to your drapery department, Dan, because it's like we need material on the walls to soften it so it has this glow. And I need to use any fabric you can get me that has a sort of velvet feeling that I can put on the walls and wallpaper. And I need every piece of pink silk you have. And so we all arrived on set as the painters were repainting, and then we had to redecorate it, and it worked out. And I remember John coming in saying, he went, "Phew, I've never said this to you, but I'm really glad you repainted that set."
I'm just gonna tell actually the original set color was green, and because it was the Emerald City, and of course we felt like it should really be pink, and so it became pink.
Well, it's very hard though. You've got to fit Glinda's style into the Emerald City. And the Emerald City, this has to work in the Emerald City. And if you look at this sort of deco-driven golden age of Hollywood, it's like, how do you fit that into our sort of Beaux Arts architecture that's moving green and transparent into the outside? But it just kind of works for this set.
Yeah, those mirrors were a real problem. We had the mirror cut, but each mirror was on its own gimbal, so it could be pivoted for camera. So it was all kind of done with our effects team, but they were a very complicated rig actually behind each of the mirrors to allow John to do this one shot all the way through like the set.
I mean, this is actually, if you look at this, if you look at the mirror shots, because we're pushing through mirrors into the reflection of the set, and we do it well, we have to do it 6 times because we have to get back to the non-reflected set. So if you look at this shot here, you're pushing into the mirror, we're behind Glinda. Now we're looking at her, we're going through the mirror now. So the wall's opening, now digital takeover of the mirror. So the wall's opening so we can swing around with the camera. Then we have to do a comp shot here, and we flipped. The reason the set is symmetrical, 2 staircases, 2 mirrors, 3 doors, is so we can now flip to the other side of the set because we obviously can't build the set 7 times. So and so then we can then cut to the other side. And so if you look here, she looks up. Here's a reflection. Now we're actually with a camera high in the rafters, pushing down on the same set into her reflection. And so it's stitched together with effects. So the whole thing has to work symmetrically and flow seamlessly because now we've got a reflected set on Z, an upside down set. And so now we're either in a reflection or not. So we are back in the real Glinda side. And so it was very, very complicated for camera, electric, set deck, art, for every department. And it's but you wouldn't really know it. You know, it's as complicated as Fiero's spinning wheels from the first film, because set walls had to open to allow camera to get through, and it's all practically lit. Lee had to come up with all these strong lighting decisions. So because we had to move the camera around on a steady cam, we had to be lit. It had to be self-lit, essentially.
Well, yeah, I saw a Q&A actually at the Academy screening not long ago where the DP was there and she was speaking about this shot particularly. And, obviously it feeds right into that girl in the bubble theme with the circles and the reflections and evaluating your life. I mean, it's just such of a piece. I just was thrilled. Lee, those fixtures are incredible. Can you talk about how you came up with these and dealing with your director of photography?
Oh well, this set finding Art Deco pieces now is quite a problem. We searched high and low for everything for this set, and we luckily found like a supplier that had nearly everything which we needed. It was like and they wanted to sell everything, and so we were able to acquire the armchairs, some of the consoles, the sofas we had to build, but all the lighting, we found a particular style which we liked, and then we had to then amplify it. So we had to run it all through our prop making team because we needed so many of them. They were everywhere. I think we had about over 100 practicals on that one set, and as you can see with the sunken floor and the fabrics, we had the fabrics woven, and we ended up, I think I always tend to have a process whereby I like to kind of test dress almost everything in the prop room first to make sure that the pieces are working and the colors are working and the fabrics are working. And sometimes I have room to set it all out as per scale of how the sets actually can, or I can do it as like a vignette form where I might just set up like, the armchairs like in the sofa and then strike that and move to the next part of the set. So I can invite Nathan and John down so they can see the process actually happening, so they can see the set dressing actually working throughout, the set. And it also really helps with like timescale when, in this case, the set ran like a little bit late because of because they changed to like, the color, but it meant that everything could be installed really easy. But also Nathan and John also knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yes, I mean, your burl wood, the ends of those sofas. I mean, the burl wood is beautiful, and the paint department. Lee has this sort of giant warehouse where you go drapery, paint, your construction guys, your prop makers, your the smalls, and then all the stuff you buy. And so you can really start to, once you lay it out in your open space, you can start to say, hey, we need something here, and then you run down the racks and what have you got? And it's very sort of fluid. And I mean, those shops are great fun. Your Draper is like unbelievable.
But it just helps with my kind of process that I kind of always know exactly what I'm doing, and we don't have any kind of major errors.
You must have to have a lot of space in order to lay out some of these sets that you're dealing with on this. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we were lucky on this film. So they gave us a really good warehouse space, and I utilized every inch of it.
Yeah, we used to go in there and do a full size print of the train in elevation, stick it on. He has such big walls. It's like, let's just stick it on your wall, see what it looks like to stand against. And then we hung the drapes for the mechanical head from your ceiling, and it was great. It was a brilliant test area. It's very rare that production ever gives us anything. That is, I think that must have been a mistake.
I think I've actually continued to use like the same kind of process on like other films, but in a more of a postage stamp space. But it's still just about works.
Yeah, well, that train was something else. That was a beautiful, beautiful train, which is, seen in both films. Was there any difference between the train in the first and the second?
Just pink, one screen, one pink. The pink was actually done digitally because we didn't have time to paint it. We'd planned to back it up because we're in a giant field here. We planned to back it up and build a tent in the countryside to the left of this, and then go in there overnight and spray it. But they had to back the scenes. So, and it happened to be green. So the visual effects team were like, we can turn that pink. So, but the problem is finding the right pink, as you know, it's never that simple, is it? So,
Stories of Barbie.
yeah.
But and this is one of your farmer Nathan moments where you had to grow barley around the train.
Yeah. It's always well, we were on the back lot. We knew the train. We had to lay because it's mechanical. It runs. It's somewhere between 42 and 52 tons. No one's actually figured it out. But we need to lay the rails and build the platform. And I'd always seen it as the great American, the Great Plains, and it was an American fairy tale, and the train should be a slice of Americana. And they needed it on the back lot for all the dancers, fair enough. And so, it was, we ended up growing the barley because again, we had the farmers and we had the great green department. It was like, well, they said, well, you get the barley in, it's one of the easiest crops to grow, but you gotta seed it now. And the biggest problem was stopping the lighting cranes, destroying it. We're out there with we create ditches with it's like dig a ditch so they can't get a crane over.
It was interesting. It was interesting just seeing the model of the train. That's in the Wizard's Chamber behind the curtain. I mean, that set is a representation really of Carnival past. When in the first film, when Elphaba goes to the very top of the tower, and she's beginning to realize who the wizard truly is, and we'd had like old parts of his Carnival past, which is represented in the base art, and at the top was like the green uniforms, which he's actually beginning to make. But everything comes from here. It's kind of like his laboratory of all the elements. The console that actually controls the head. With like sound effects around it, and we did all this research to how old theaters would work. And like a magician right here. And the fact that all of it is fake, all of it is just controlled. All of it is just a spectacle. It's just theater. He's not a magician. He's not a wizard. And embedded around the set here, it was representations of the Yerbrick Road. There was an experimental clockwork monkey. There was everything to do with like how the head had been made and the construction of it. And it was interesting. I mean, you were able to play with all of those themes of the fact that actually there was nothing really magical about him at all. He's actually, he's not a wizard.
Yeah, he's a man behind the curtain. He's an illusionist. I love this workshop because it's just like it's everything from the sort of illusionist of the late 1800s, and it's all clockmaking automatons, and the eyes are puppeteer. That was our great puppeteer, Chris, again, automating the eyes. I mean, look at this desk. Lee carved all these different expressions. So when you pressed each head, it was supposed to make the giant wizard's head smile or be sad or cry. So it could all be an illusion backstage. I mean, what a desk.
Yeah, I mean, if Nathan had the head to build, we had this to build, and it was fully practical. I mean, everything turned, moved, even down to the small clockwork train that runs on the track. The track was all completely practical. Well, what was really amazing about it is that there was something quite tactile about this. You really feel that you could use it. And John was really interested in Jeff, obviously, just interacting with it. So he was pretty precise about where everything went on the layout. And so and then Jeff just kind of improvised around the whole thing, and he did use the set dressing. He really got into it. He really loved it. I mean, he was forever playing with the wobble board, which made the crashing sound effect of like what thunder was, which is we thought about how the head would move, how it would also sound, and so we represented everything in the objects around the console.
And this set was situated, wasn't it? It was right next to the headroom, the big throne, which was you called it the throne room where the head was, right?
Yeah, it was right. It was behind it on stage three at Sky. Yeah, we just about had enough space, but it was called the control room, the throne room. But the hydraulics for the head were up in the ceiling of the control room because they had to be mounted from the roof to make it work and hydraulically swing the head into the other set. And so it was tight for space. So it all became it had to be big enough that we could just not float any walls and you just shot it. You know, it was like essentially you found this space and you couldn't you couldn't change much because there's no even the map, the yellow brick road or the road egg map from the map room in the throne room was in there as well. And that was a whole thing from the first film. So all of that was put on stage three, and mainly because we kind of ran out of stage space and we had to turn these around. We were shooting in the winter to begin with, so we couldn't go out to the back lot. So we had to get everything ready. We had to shoot out all the sound stages, which meant we would turn them around. We do film two after film one. All the lighting rigs had to work for both films, and the amount of equipment in there, it was enormous. And then, of course, the painting that rolls back, that chisery rolls back to show them the dungeons. That's also in this set. So it was a complex piece. I mean, it was a very complex piece of planning, and every single department it was mad in there.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think you're slightly underplaying how complex it was, because honestly, when you went in there, I mean, it was like a intimidation chamber as you first walked in, and it was such a dramatic thing having the head there, and then the curtain with 3,000 strands in it that you could physically walk through. And then what Nathan's actually about, the rig to hold the head was then above us, and then we had the platform over the console, and then the set behind it, and it was the most one of the most immersive sets I've ever been in, and it was genuinely like such an accomplishment because you could move from space to space to space, and it was fun. You know, the first part with the head in it is absolutely terrifying, and then you get backstage and you realize the whole thing is like a theater.
Yeah, and then wonderful where the whole dome lights up, and it becomes a dance scene in film two, and then the head is dancing along. I mean, I mean that stuff. It was really fun to shoot.
And what you're saying is also emphasizing the fact that you guys did so much in camera. And not to minimize, of course, there's a contribution for visual effects and it's dramatic, but people sometimes don't realize how much contribution you guys have put into this movie. I mean, there's so much in camera.
That there's no fake ceiling up there. That stage luckily was 48 feet high, so we could take the throne room ceiling all the way up. The visual effects in here are the floating air balloons, and that's it. So the head's moving to the dance. They might have done some lip syncing for the head, but not there. Yeah, so it's really it was a fun set to build.
And this, but that comment is true for almost every set in the film. I mean, you guys made so much great stuff that's so beautiful, so interactive for the actors. You've already talked a little bit about how the actors are involved in your process as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the rules we were going by is if you can build it, we should. And if we have the funds, we will. And we go as far as we possibly can with the help we have. I mean, we have an incredible group of people to help us. And over the years of getting to know these people, it's I feel like they're part of our family. We have like Packard, the Scenics, we have Dan, the Draperies, we have the Great Steel Department with Paul Hayes and Mark Seath Construction. We have these people that we've worked with on and off for really for 20 years. And they've come abroad with us on different films, and I just feel like I just trust them. Like because these are complicated sets, and we're kind of a big family. It was so enjoyable being in the art department and set tech department.
Of course, the crews are incredible and the crews are vital. I mean, I know some of the people you're working with, Lee. Can you talk about some of your team?
Or Jamie Wilkinson, you know, who was our prop master, did the most amazing job, you know, and his team, you know, of model makers and prop makers, and you know, he he worked with John. I mean, I honestly, after watching the second film, and you know, we shot these movies, what, how many years ago, Nathan? Was it 2.5 years, maybe 3 years
Yeah,
ago?
that's a while
That we
back.
started, you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of the memories come back, you know, of where you were and how like you did it, and the effort which you went to. And as Nathan says, you don't do it on your own. You do it with a team of people actually around you. You know, and you know, you know, I'm blessed to work with Kate Venner, who's my buyer, but you know, she's kind of like absolutely everything to me. You know, we've now done 17 films actually together, and you know, it's a partnership, and it all goes kind of hand in hand.
And
And
I went to art school with her when I was 18.
yeah, yeah. You know, so it's kind of like it is like a bit of a family, and you
Well,
know, you know,
Jamie Wilkinson was on Dark Knight with us. You know, this is how it goes a long way back. And I think when you sort of have been around the block, you have these connections with your crew that are very valuable.
And one of the differences, just to make sure our audience, which is of course international, but also a lot of Americans, sometimes the property master's role is quite different in the UK. And for example, Jamie Wilkinson, property master, is running your building shop and in some ways acting as equivalent to our lead person. So running your dressing crew as well. It's quite a large role.
it's a really big role. Yeah, I think that's the main, because I think in the States they split the role. So a prop master just does the hand props. Yeah, Jamie plays both roles. I mean, he has like a structure where he has like a supervisor, which is probably the equivalent of your lead person, you know, to actually help me with like the sets. But the way it works more in like the UK, Jamie and I do things hand in hand. So I may actually see something that's the perfect kind of hand prop, and I'll just acquire it for him and say, "What about this?" And he'll go, "What are you thinking?" But most of the time he goes, "Yes, I'll take that off your hands." So it's kind of like, you know, and so but again, you know, I mean, he had such a big role on this with like Elphaba's broom, you know, and the wands, you know, it was like these are significant hand props, which were really part of not just the hand prop, they were part of a world, you know, and part of the characters which are actually display. So he's like kind of like probably the third part, you know, to like this little trilogy which we have here. It's interesting going back through the film as well, because there's certain sets which just actually come to mind. Like, you know, when we started talking about this, you were talking about which sets had we redressed. I think the most significant set which we redressed, and conceptually it was the hardest set which we did actually, was actually the wedding scene, and it was actually the last set that Nathan designed, and it was Nathan, would you say it was the last one which we got to with John? Would you say it was the
Yeah, I mean,
wedding?
I think I know you didn't. I know you didn't because you were planning the wedding for a long time, but I
Yeah.
totally ignored it because I had too much. I was trying to build the Emerald City, and I knew we had already built this interior, and it was like, okay, and it was a little offhand, but then I think probably you made me focus on it as like we're gonna have to put some nature in, so it's like get the trees.
Well, this set went through so many different looks,
Yeah.
and at one point, John was talking about it actually being on water, and like we went through. I think we went through about, I don't know, maybe 20 ideas to what this set could actually be, and then there was this one day. I saw a painting by Fragonard. It's called The Swing, and it's just this enchanted garden with a girl in like a pink dress. And I said, "Oh, it's a garden." And this is the biggest wedding I've ever decorated, and it just felt like, okay, an Aussian garden, an Aussian enchanted garden. And so the whole idea of the circular trees of like the forest. But this is a collaboration that's so in equal parts between Nathan, me, and John, and and it was basically these really beautiful grassy banks with like these little chairs and picnics and swings in like the trees, and the combination of basically this kind of wedding, that everything which you wanted, but it's not at all. That's not
I mean,
actually the case.
John was very particular about this and wanted to find it. Was a very important moment for him. Well, and for the film, Glinda. It's one of the saddest scenes post wedding on the steps. But I think he really wanted to find it. And the problem with the Hall of Grandeur from the first film, it was as Lee said, it was a hall of intimidation with the monkeys. And so then to turn it into this wondrous place required a lot of nature. But nature was the answer, I think, once because it's Ozian and it was in front of us, but we had to get to it. But there's a lot of stuff in there, Lee.
Yeah, there was a lot there was a lot of things. It's kind of really interesting because really I like the start of the movie trying to find what Oz actually was and not really understanding what Oz is. It's the same. It's like a language. It's like it's what you go through in every single film. Like you're a kind of an infant at the start, and by the end you're completely fluent in the language of what Oz was. And by this we were there, and we were in our stride.
But once again, that's all built. And there's a reason for building it too, because it adds that sort of handmade quality that gives you the nostalgia of Oz. So you have to make as much as you can, and that's across all our departments. The more we make, the more it feels like it belongs in the Wizard of Oz. The key is being practical, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Do you know, Nathan, the only other set which is really interesting is that at the end of finishing both films, I was interviewed by the studio for like what's it called the backstage stuff which you do for like camera and stuff,
Yeah.
and the set which I was probably most proud of, which is more featured in film too, is the governor's mansion, and
Yeah.
it's only because it took me such a long time to work out what the furniture was actually going to be. And Kate and I had been over to Paris, and we acquired some original Art Nouveau pieces, and Nathan had actually and this set was just unbelievable. I mean, I
Well, that's
worked.
one of the fireplace is one of the ones you got from Paris, right?
Yeah, we found it in Paris.
Yeah.
That
So
actual fireplace.
Lee came back with all this stuff. It's like, great, let's put it into the set. Let's build it in. And
Yeah.
it just, you couldn't, yeah, there's the cabinet there. And I think it all, I mean, it was actually great having those pieces to start with because it was like, okay, now we have a starting point. And again, it goes back to nature. They're the Munchkins, it's the governor of Munchkinland. So, and then you get, I mean, there's Horta, the Belgium architect Horta, I looked at specifically. And then you just got into the Beaux Arts, which is fantastic.
Yeah. It was kind of the furniture. We found some key pieces. We found some key pieces actually in the first one. The cradle we found in Austria, and the bed we found in Paris. But over the course of the entire film, which was probably we were on that film for a year, Nathan. We were on the film maybe even longer.
Yeah, I think it's a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, about a year and a half. But we started thinking about this. In fact, actually, Nathan, that bed in film one was the first thing which I concepted, trying to get into the Ozian space of what Oz was,
Yeah.
and leaning into the Art Nouveau, which was only really applicable to the governor's mansion, really, because you felt like we were in it was meant to be a country house. It was a very grand house, and the combination of the Art Nouveau style just seemed a really good fit.
I mean, the arches here are actually from Morrible's set in Shiz because I was starting running out of money for the Emerald City, and it was like I remember going to see construction saying, what do we got? I need some arches and a dome roof. And I mean, even though we refinished it, it was like, well, we could just lift the whole dome of Morables because we see it for one quick scene from film one, because she doesn't play in film two. She's in the propaganda room. And we could put it here and we just, we cut the columns and put Art Nouveau columns in instead. So it was like, okay, we can get on budget here and put the money into the Emerald City. And then David Packard, our scenic painter, who's a backing painter, I said, look, we've got to have to decorate this. You're going to have to hand paint this whole ceiling. When you can see it, it's all hand painted over the tiles. And the columns, we got the plasterers to make up, in a sort of nouveau style. And so we sort of came together from pieces of I had to, because I was missing. You can't have a missing wall on the Emerald City, but we had enough pieces to put this together. In a weird way, it worked out really well. I was a bit worried about it because it was a amalgamation of things. But this scene is brilliant when he becomes the Tin Man. It's like, I mean, it's such a. I mean, again, there's this tragedy of the Wicked Witch of the East and Bok and the Tin Man. It's sad.
And what was really interesting about this Paul Taswell costume, I had a great relationship actually with him. And when he was seeking, he pitched to John the idea that the Tin Man costume came from the objects that were in the room. And he gave me a real free hand in trying to choose those objects to key into the costume, and it worked brilliantly. And there were certain things which he needed, which we wouldn't have found, but there were certain things which I just loved that he then incorporated into the costume. The heart plate of the Tin Man actually comes from like the fireplace, and we embedded the design of that, and then he took the design from the set dressing and put it into the costume. And equally, I would find things which he would need, and it was brilliant, to actually have, to be included in that process. And the rest of the pieces in the set were all a bespoke make. I mean, the grandfather clocks alone, there's a pair of them because one is a seasonal grandfather clock and the other one is for crops, because guess what, we're in Munchkinland, so
Yeah. And they have to have 13 hours on the clock face.
It has have 13 hours on the clocks as well.
Well, these are some insider tips that are absolutely invaluable. I love that his costume comes from that set. I mean, there were so many details in the set. I was about to ask you about them. So now we have something that we can really hang our hat on for looking closely at the Governor's Mansion set and our poor future Tin Man. It's amazing. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I can understand. And speaking of how you borrowed a little bit from marble, there's and the key prop here is that newspaper, which I guess is designed by your graphic designer. I mean, that's an old friend of mine too, Dan Burke.
Dan Burke, marvelous Dan.
And we have the picture of the propaganda area for Madame Morrible. That is pretty great, showing all of those newspapers around her, which is a beautiful, beautiful piece of graphic art. Look at all that. It's amazing.
I know there were so many of them. We found these two old printing presses, which I just loved. There was something about, from Art Nouveau in the Governor's Mansion to the Art Deco lines in the Emerald City. This was definitely something to do in but we looked at Bakelite and the 1930s and the line weight of all the pieces in this room, but I found these printing presses that just had this weight to them, and they kind of look like a machine gun. And I kind of pitched this to John. I was like, couldn't they be firing the newspapers out of the windows? I thought I was quite mad, but anyway, our effects team came up with this amazing rigger. We converted the presses into these really amazing large scale paper machine guns, and then Dan Burke actually designed all this literature that was absolutely fascinating. I mean, honestly, him and his team embedded with all. I mean, there were layers and layers and layers to every single set, and everything is like a process and you do it with a team of people around you. But the graphics team on, on this job works so exceptional. They really did take so much care thinking about absolutely every aspect of it, from the girls' bedroom in Shiz all the way through to this set. And they had a lot of fun with it. Like the Easter eggs that they would that they'd plant in, like from the Oscars ballroom invitation cards on the mantelpiece in like the girls' dorm, all the way through to these propaganda sheets
And,
here.
I mean, to the right of this image is all blackboards, and Dan and his team. I said I need maps of the Emerald City, so we're going to have to come up with where everything is of the Emerald City, because this is a propaganda room. They will know where everything is, so we need a big chalked out, hand drawn map of the Emerald City. So Dan and his and his graphics team actually came on set with ladders, and they slowly drew the map in chalk. But it was a very beautiful image, and it's right in the background. But that is the Emerald City, and then my favorite window in all of Oz is to the right of her, which is what I call the eyebrow window. That kind of is a round window, but it tilts in and it has shingles on it, and it took a long time with the sculptors to get there, because like, it was like you can't just have green. Like you need blue and you need bronze. Like everything can't be green. It just doesn't work. And that window was the key, I think.
Another item in that set, I think it's that set, is Madame Morable's amazing type machine,
Yeah.
typewriter from one. But wonderful. Tell us a little bit about that typewriter. How did that happen?
Oh, we found them in like a junk shop outside of Belgium, and I went, "Oh my God, that's an Aussie typewriter. That it has to be that." And then I found so much stuff, but we had our prop making team that would do like a bespoke piece, and they would build like large scale pieces, like the road building vehicle, or like sofas in like the governor's mansion. But you'd also give them like these small things and just give them an object, and they just kit bash it for you, and you would just give them like a bunch of objects. And these guys are just these gifted sculptors. Sometimes I would try to give them a concept, or I would play with it actually myself. Okay, I was something, there's a lens here and there, and I would have like a fun with it. But these guys would just come up with this stuff, and and I in Morables in the first film, throughout the entire set, there were four large cabinets, and the objects which were in them, I based them on weather patterns. I think one was lightning, one was rain, one was sun, and the prop makers, we just gave them this bunch of stuff, and they just came up with all these tiny little bits of sculpture, I guess, and like the typewriter was a bit like that. They just invented the technology that themselves.
Right, because Madame Morable is the expert on the weather. And of course, she's the one who calls in the tornado, which starts the whole thing. The weaving together is astounding. I mean, between the stuff you guys have made up and whatever, our writers came up with, I mean, it's incredible. Now, can we please turn to Kamiko Palace?
Yeah.
I loved it. Oh my God. Tell us a little bit. So the ancient seat of Oz, one of Fiero's family palaces, only one of them, I guess.
Yeah.
And your influences, your architectural influences, and please tell me the backstory of the human figures, statues.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So Kiamiko, because it's as far west and it is held by that little bridge, and it has the round window, and it's pushing to her future, which is the impassable desert. It is not. It's almost not part of Oz. But I've always, the design theory behind Kiamiko is I've always saw it as part of the land and therefore part of the Grimmery. So it needed to have magic. It's an ancient ruined castle. So I was thinking, well, can I do a floating castle? Because this is a big trope of fantasy and anime. But how do I do that without people not believing we're in Oz? So I saw this art piece where the columns didn't touch the floor, and I thought, well, that's anti-gravity. That column defies gravity, and it was just one column or two. And I was thinking, well, if I could have the main area in this image, you can see the light coming through the center area. So if I could do an arch and then re reflected arch, so it was like two magnets, earth magnets pushing away from each other that didn't really touch, you you'll see the light come through, and therefore the whole battlements where for good is, and the witch's chamber with the round window where Alphabet melts or kind of doesn't. I shouldn't give you that away, give that away. So this is all floating, and the angels up there, the two angels, which are Slavic angels, and sort of I'd spent a lot of time in Slovakia doing behind enemy lines, and I had to do this giant angel. So I was in the art school a lot with this Slavic sculptor who used to drink schnapps, or they would call it Borovichka. It was very hard to, I had to go and see him early in the morning, and he would build me the giant angel. So I always remember his Slavic angels, and I always loved that sort of Tito-esque style. So I threw him in here thinking if there were two angels facing each other, I mean, it's for good, it's symbolic. I mean, there's so many themes in here. There's blue, because what is Kiamiko? What is everyone's remembrance of Kiamiko? It's under a blue moon. So the blue is its color. I didn't want the granite or the stoneness of a castle. The architectural language of castles is just big stones. So could we put glazed brick in? And how could we make that work? And then of course the round window, which is very uncastle-like. But of course, how do you intersect a round window? So if you could step out the bricks and then meet a vertical, there's so many themes in here. The tapestries, because the language of castles is the secret passages are behind the tapestries, and we know she hides underneath. She hides in the secret passageway, and she doesn't get melted, and she goes into the impassable desert. So the language of secret passages has to be in there. So then, well, what's on the tapestries is like, well, let's create ancient landscapes of Oz because we are in Kiamiko. So, I mean, this is one of my favorite sets because there's so much story depth in here. It was a little hard to get to, and even the floor. If you look at the floor and the floor patterns and the round, everything had to work together. But there's so many shapes fighting each other, but they don't really in this image. So, anyway, I enjoy this set because it really is. It's a time of the ancient grimoire.
It's really nice going back over these sets. Mark Platt always said to Nathan, Oz is a circle and it's like a triangle, it's like, or it's a circle, and we played with that theme. And down on like the battlements, there was like you see a piano at the very start in the governor's mansion. We played like a second piano out on like the battlements that's been pulled out. And it kind of had like the shape to like a Z, and then there was an Ozian harp. And the idea was, as John always said, so many details, Lee, so many details. And the idea was that the harp and the piano, two things actually come together to make one, spelt the word Oz. And that's who our two characters are, without the circle and the triangle. They can't exist, they coexist only together.
Wow. Well, I don't know about you guys, but the Chemical Palace is a place in my dreams of fear. I mean, it was so scary as a kid. And you guys have done it such justice. I mean, it is just astoundingly beautiful. Well, I wanted to are there other sets that we haven't touched on that you feel like we need to address?
So many, Rosemary. I've got a list here.
I mean, the film is astounding. The seriousness and the sort of darkness of this film really appealed to me. You've done an incredible job. I mean, it's interesting to hear you talk about this film as though it's like a little bit of a rear view mirror, but just re-experiencing it when you went to the theater recently. That's pretty fabulous. I mean, thank you. I'm thrilled by the way this movie looks. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of the whole team. I'm proud of our industry for supporting a movie like this. Beautifully done.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there's value in making these giant films. There's still value of going to the cinema because I love seeing this film in the cinema. Like you, Rosemary, it's because there's been some distance. It just takes me away. The distance is a plus because and I'm allowed to fall into the screen. And this is what I always wanted as a kid, is just fall into the screen. And yeah, it's my kind of film that's epic and big stories and the creation of the witches of Oz.
Rosemary, I don't know about you, but I completely sobbed. I sobbed and I sobbed. I'm officially a sobber.
It's for good. How can you not? When she picks up a hat at the end, and it's like, even though she's under the floor, it's like, and she can't tell her. And it's like, there's so many great moments.
It's a really good movie. I loved it, and your work is exquisite. And I really want to thank you for continuing to be doing these movies and being part of our Inside the Set with SETDECOR, because we've now had quite a number of interviews with you guys on some amazing award-winning and nominated and well-regarded films of delightful fantasy, delightful world building, incredible craftsmanship, and you deserve a lot of credit. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rosemary.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with SETDECOR. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, SETDECOR.com.